And we are live. Welcome, everyone. I'm Hafsat Akhani, and I'm the program manager here at Leadership Brainery. Thank you all so much for joining us for the second episode of our Diversifying Postgraduate Education series, Business School Admissions. Throughout the event, we encourage you all to ask questions and engage with one another throughout the chat. And I'll kind of just go over a little bit about how that works. And so to the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see event, and then you'll see chat, polls, Q&A. The chat is where you can chat with everyone, and the Q&A is where you can ask your questions. You can ask them anonymously or not, and you also have the option to upvote other questions that you may be interested in hearing answers from. So if there's something that really catches your attention, go ahead and click that like button so that you can upvote it. And so with that being said, I guess I'll go into a little bit more of an intro. And each year, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics releases a report on the demographic information of employed people in America. The data that my colleague Catherine just put in the chat includes the percentage or the current percentage of chief executives in the United States by race and ethnicity. And so for Black chief executives, it's about 4%, Asian about 5%, Latinx about 7%, and white about 88%. And so these disproportionate statistics is exactly why the Leadership Brainery exists. It's exactly why we're here today. And so LB seeks to recruit extraordinary young leaders from diverse backgrounds and equip them with the knowledge and the skills to gain entry into and successfully graduate from a broad range of professional schools. The intent is for these efforts to contribute to a more vibrant and equitable workforce. And so the overarching goal of our organization is to truly transform our country's leadership in sustainable and meaningful ways. And with all of that being said, I will pass it over into Catherine, who will share a little bit more about who Leadership Brainery is and why we do the work that we do.
Thanks, Hafsat. Greetings, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our second in our series of Diversifying Postgraduate Education. I'm Catherine Wong. I'm LB's Director of Equity Implementation. At LB, we envision a day when competitive graduate and professional school classrooms throughout the country are enriched by an equitable representation of first-generation and diverse students, and who, upon graduation, are prepared and empowered to lead and transform our country's workforce. We need you. As we begin today's conversation, we want to acknowledge the emotional toll and challenges of the past year, with particular recognition to yesterday's verdict. We know that some of you may just feel very heavy and maybe just feeling needing sort of grace. We hope that today's conversation will be uplifting and highlight the importance of having leaders like you at the table. The format of today's interactive panel is as follows. We're going to engage our panelists in questions that LB has prepared. We're going to encourage you, as Hafsat said, to continue to ask questions throughout the conversation, and we have reserved time at the end of the panel for Q&A. We also will be sharing a feedback form, knowing that your input continues to help us grow. And we also have a raffle for those of you who are here today and have signed up for LB Connect.
Sweet. So with all that being said, at this time, I'd like to welcome and invite our three esteemed panelists to share their introductions. Could you all please share your name, your position, why you believe LB's mission is important, and how your program is prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we can start with Brooke.
In true HBS fashion, a cold call. So I am Dr. Brooke Dennard Rosser. I am the Assistant Director of MBA Admissions and Diversity Outreach here at Harvard Business School. And I think, we strongly believe in the mission of Leadership Brainery because I think it very tightly aligns with our mission, which is to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. I think the global lens on that's especially important. And I think being able to not only lead, but cultivate communities and environments professionally, where folks from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all races, classes, all educational backgrounds, geographic, religious, etc., are really best positioned to thrive and be successful. And so I think, I'm a big believer in bringing your whole self to work each day. And I'm super honored that I get to work in an environment where I do get to bring all of myself to the work each day. And I continue to be really proud of the work that our institution is doing, like so many companies and schools and organizations around the US and around the world, as it relates to DEI-focused initiatives. Happy to talk more about some of those and answer questions about specific ones. But I think I always like to think that my role is definitely a testament to the institutional commitment. I interviewed for this position back in 2019 and appreciated the fact that even then the university was already aware and thinking about, hey, this is an area of opportunity for us. How can we begin to think strategically about doing this work and building in systems and infrastructures of accountability to make sure that we're doing it with intention and purpose. So super excited to be here and happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thank you, Brooke. Tommaso, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tommaso Canetta, and I'm the Associate Director for Diversity Recruiting at the MIT Sloan School of Management, just down the road from Brook, and really excited to be here to talk to all of you about business school and about MIT Sloan. Our mission at MIT Sloan is to develop principled and innovative leaders who are going to improve the world and to generate ideas that advance management practice. And we believe that the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is a key component of both principled leadership and sound management practice. And so, we are really we believe really strongly that part of this is increasing the diversity of our programs and really engaging in conversation and action around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We understand that as a business school, as developing future leaders of organizations, leaders in management, we're in a unique position and have a unique opportunity to make a broader impact on both social and economic inequities. And so we hope that through our programs, through supporting teaching, research, and the development of leaders, we can foster, diverse, equitable, and inclusive business practices, not just, on our campus, but far beyond as well. And so really support, obviously, the work that LB is doing, and really appreciate all of you being here to take this step to learn more about the opportunities in business school for yourselves. So great to be here. Thanks for having us.
All right, I can go next then. Hi, everyone. My name is Chitale. My pronouns are he, him. I am the Director of Diversity Admissions over here down a much longer road across the country at Berkeley Haas. So really proud to be representing the West Coast here today. The mission, like LB's mission, is just phenomenal. And Brook and Tommaso already nailed it. And so I'll just emphasize and say, as institutes of higher education, as business schools, as top business schools that have pretty outsized impact across our community, across our society, through our students, through our companies, through recruiting. I mean, think about that, right? Kind of both directions. We have so much potential. I think it's really critical that we take that leadership stance. One thing that I know a lot of us in this industry, and really just a lot of us thinking about things in life right now, think about is like, where does it change? It's really easy to look around and say it's the entire system, because it is. Who gets the outsized impact to actually change things first? Who takes that first step, that second step, that third step to then inspire others to move? And I think as institutes of higher learning, we get to play that role, which is a phenomenal opportunity. Again, because we have that outsized impact. We're sending out hundreds and thousands of business leaders, societal leaders, and if they come through with that different perspective to say inclusion, equity, diversity, belonging, these are critical, these are required, these are not nice to have, this is just a core part of how we do things. I get excited at that prospect. In terms of Haas, also very proud of the commitment we're making. Our team, our Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer, our Associate Director, et cetera. We have a structured team in place. DEI is one of our Dean's 3 key priorities alongside sustainability and innovation, and of course, the intersections therein. And we released a plan, as I know that all of our colleagues have, that really tries to stay transparent to what that commitment actually is. and shows you that level of priority, which, by the way, we should all celebrate because that's a really good thing. It's all transparent. We can actually move things forward as a community. So really glad to be here. Thank you all for having me. Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. So with that being said, I'll let Catherine go ahead and ask our first question.
So our first question is, what is one piece of advice that you would give a prospective, diverse, and first-generation business school applicant? And this time, we won't have Brooke go first. We'll have Tommaso.
The tough one to go first on, because there is so many different pieces of advice. It's hard to whittle it down to just one. I mean, I think I think first and foremost is that you can do this, and that there are a lot of resources and sort of opportunities out there to help you, to support you through this process. I know, I used to work in undergraduate admissions, and I remember working with high school students, and they had, in many cases, they had college counselors, and, their peers were going through the similar process. They had a lot of support, in many cases. And when you're applying to grad school, it's a little bit different. Not everyone in your peer group may be following that same path. You may not have access to, the counseling or advising. And so, but those resources exist, whether it's organizations like LB, of course, as well as many other organizations, as well as folks like the three of us who you see here on your screen, the admissions representatives at the schools. We are here to support you. We are your advocates. We, as you've heard, all have a priority at our schools around expanding the pipeline of applicants to our programs from different backgrounds. And so it's a vague piece of advice, but it is that you can do this, and that there are a lot of folks out there and resources that will help you. And happy to sort of dive into more specifics about what some of those are, but maybe I'll just kind of leave it at that to start, and hopefully Brooke and Noam have some other good pieces of advice to share too.
I can go next so that Brook, you can kind of take us home on this question. Amazing advice, Tommaso. So let me give another one, because everything that Tommaso just said, of course, you saw us nodding along vigorously. We totally agree. My other piece of advice is own your story, because you bring a phenomenal perspective on leadership that folks who have not had that experience, who do not have that background, cannot bring and are eager to learn from, right? So I know that a lot of times, again, in our kind of broader society, some of these experiences, lived experiences, professional experiences, upbringing, it might lead to a higher sense of imposter syndrome than even others feel. And everyone feels imposter syndrome in business school, but I fully acknowledge the fact that if you're coming from a greater distance traveled, you're probably feeling it that much more. So I urge you to flip that coin a little bit and see, which I suspect you already do, but just know that from our perspective, we also see that as a competitive advantage. Right, you're bringing a lens. You've traveled a great journey. You've gone through obstacles. You have perhaps the reasons to believe in your goals that others may not. Because I look at an application and I say, if you've gone through that much to get here and you still care about this that much, when you hit the next set of obstacles, I have full reason to believe that you're going to figure it out and keep going. That is part of our role, right, in this ecosystem in admissions in business schools, is to start thinking about your future trajectory. And so I see it as an absolute measure of success, that the journey you've traveled, the distance you've traveled, impacts your potential trajectory going forward. And especially as business schools, if we can remove some of those obstacles that are in our systems, whether they're financial, and we'll get into the financial piece, I know it's a huge part of it, whether it's around access to resources of other kinds, that's what we get excited about. So join us in that excitement. Feel really proud and strong in what you bring in terms of that story, own it, and tell us that authentic story so that we can really get excited alongside you. What do you think, Brooke? I saw you nodding along again, so I suspect we're on the same page.
I should have gone second, okay? Because my immediate thought was lean in to your truth, and know that we appreciate that and see that. And so then, since Om took that one, I think the other thing is shoot your shot, right? Like I think I spend a lot of time trying to help folks not self-select out. I think it's really easy when you're looking at our programs to be like, ooh, you know, I'm like decently smart, like I've done okay, but I don't know that like I'm Sloan or Haas smart, right? Like I'm not sure. Don't self-select out. Shoot your shot. Your lived experience as it is more than enough. I think it's easy to get hung up on or caught up in who you think we want to see. And so really just to drive home what Tommaso and Om have said, like your narrative and your lived experience is more than enough. And you should approach the application process from a lens of, I just want to help them get to know me. I just want to help them see who I am as a person and what I've accomplished personally and professionally. And I think if you do that, that really puts us in the best position to see you as you see yourself. And that's really all we're trying to do through the application process. I know everyone thinks we're out here trying to crush dreams, and that is not the goal of admissions. Our goal is to get to know you better so that we can put together a class that's super diverse and that builds opportunities for folks to learn from one another's diverse experiences. So.
Noted. So admissions is not here to crush dreams. Great. But I think that's really good information though, and really good knowledge in terms of also just, I mean, if I could summarize a lot of what you all just said, it's confidence, right? So having the confidence in yourself and the ability to succeed in putting that forth in your application. So thank you for that. As we all know, applying is one obstacle, right? Getting in is another obstacle, and sort of staying there, finishing and graduating is another obstacle in its own self. And so we're really curious to know what your institutions do in particular. What are your formal and informal efforts to improve retention rates, especially for diverse and or first generation students? And we will start off with Om this time.
Yeah, thanks for that. All right, so just jumping into some of the specifics. When you come onto campus, for example, at Berkeley Haas, part of our equity strategy, right? So kind of a differential approach as needed, is that our program office, our academic office, our career management group, our alumni relations, all have a specific lens around inclusion that allows them, that encourages them, that enables them to support differentially, right? So you'll have folks who are advocating for you very specifically because we recognize that the first gen journey, low-income journey, underrepresented minority, whatever the background is. And again, it's all intersectional, of course, it requires maybe a little bit more check-in. You know, again, going back to that imposter syndrome, if you start feeling that and it overwhelms, it's really hard to focus in on all the other amazing opportunities you have in business school. So we have the supports in place very specifically to, and again, you don't have to be the one to open that door, because I know it's a bit of a Band-Aid that you have to pull off over and over and over again. We open that door, we have that policy in play across our system so that you know where to go when you need the resources. I want to be clear, you do have to kind of own that, right? And that's what everyone in business school absolutely has to do. It's part of why you're there. You're exploring, you're learning. The best we can do as we learn in business school is create the conditions in which you feel comfortable doing those things, right? So that's our responsibility. Those are some of the ways that we do it.
Let's see, Tommaso, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah, happy to jump in. I think what I've always been struck by when I look at sort of our students and their journeys is how supportive they are for each other. I think, you know, we certainly have, you know, the sort of formalized advisors and those, which I think Om really covered well. But I think, you know, you can't overlook the support of the peer group that you're a part of. And I think that's important as you're looking at different programs to really think about, you know, the community and how it is going to support you. You know, for us at Sloan, that starts, you know, even before you apply. I know our students are very involved in sort of the admissions recruiting process and really you know, talking to prospective students and applicants, and as well as, of course, once they arrive. We have a new club actually that just started in the last year, specifically for first gen and low income students, to create a community for those students from those backgrounds who were sort of often, you know, didn't recognize that there were many others like them in business school. It wasn't often talked about, and we had an event. It was an Ask Me Anything panel about being first gen, and they realized wow, there's a lot of us here. And so they actually created a club to create that support network. Likewise, we have different affinity clubs, whether it's the Black Business Student Association or Sloan Pride or LGBTQ plus student organization that create community for folks from different from similar backgrounds to gather together, and then recognize that having some of those similar lived experiences and understanding how they're impacting, how they're going through the MBA, how they're going through their business school experience, how they can sort of support each other, in addition to, again, of course, some of the more formal support structures that are in place as well.
Coming in hot, your closer. That's actually my new nickname. So I don't have, I think sames, right? I think Tommaso, you bring such a great point, and same at HBS. We also just had a new student club that was launched that is focused on the first and low income experience, but also have a lot of the institutional supports. I think one of the things that's important to elevate, and I think you both kind of touched on this, is just a lot of times the resources, they don't exist in the same way or look the same way that they did in undergrad, right? But that doesn't mean that they're there, that they're not there. I think sometimes folks, you meet someone and that one person becomes your person. And I think I speak for all of us when I'm saying we're your people, right? And at the end of the day, the beauty of our roles is that we get to know you through this prospect phase. And then once you're students, it's not like we go away. We're still on campus, we're still around. And so it's not uncommon for students to come back to me and say, hey, I need a little help. Can you point me in the right direction? So I think just wanted to flag that, yes, I think the student community is huge, and that's definitely something that's a big part of our community here at HBS. The institutional infrastructure is also equally as important. We've got a work group now of folks who exist in our career development, our SAS office, my office, as well as 2 other offices on our campus, who all have a dedicated person who is on par to partner and help and support students specifically who are coming from a low income background or who might be first gen. Just as a recognition, and we meet every 2 weeks just to keep each other in pulse about what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and how we can be thinking more thoughtfully about additional support. We did also just launch 2 new external facing websites that highlight a lot of these resources as well. So happy to drop those in the chat if folks are looking to get additional insight on what this work looks like at our institution.
Great, thanks. I think what you're all being able to hear is that though the resources may look different in graduate school than from undergrad, that they exist. And in fact, part of the recruitment process is actually a way of getting to know you and getting to know what you need. So thank you all. So actually, this leads into the next question, given that this has been an unprecedented year for admissions in lots of different ways, that we'd like for you to sort of address in what ways has the pandemic changed your admissions process? And again, pandemic meaning COVID, meaning racism and all the other isms. And we can start this time, we'll circle back to Brooke.
Closer, no more. So I think, I'll be honest, one of the things, and this is perhaps an unpopular opinion, but I've been thrilled with our ability to pivot to all virtual programming. And what I mean by that is, I think historically with all schools, right? When you get ready to enter into this application process, one, nobody's applying to just one school. And so a lot of times people are feeling the pressure to visit, to go to campus, right? To sit in on a class, to meet students, to do all of these things as a part of the decision-making process, but also people often think that that's evaluative, right? Or that we're tracking or keeping tabs on your demonstrated interest or commitment in our community. And for folks who just can't afford to go to 6 schools or 7 schools or even 1 school, not being able to come to campus has often felt like I can't even get there. So I don't even need to bother applying. So I think I've enjoyed the fact that we've been able to be virtual because we've eliminated that barrier for folks. And I think have lowered the bar for folks to say, I still don't think I'm going to apply, but I'll come to an event, right? And then you come to an event, you see somebody that's like, she's cool, I like her. I may come to another event, right? And then we look up and we're in the funnel and we're applying to business school, right? So I think we're starting to think really creatively and thoughtfully about going forward as the world seeks to resume whatever new version of normal we'll all be navigating. How do we keep this piece of the process in place with intentionality and with purpose, so that we can continue to reach people and meet people where they are and continue to cast vision for folks. So I think the virtual component has been huge. The other piece is, we were in a really fortunate position in which we were able to offer hybrid courses, meaning that we've got students in classrooms on campus and students who are participating virtually. That's been really transformative, especially for our international students, who many of them with which we're not able to get back to the US or get to the US at all. And so we're also, as an institution, thinking about what does the continuation of our work and how we think about course delivery, not just in the MBA program, but beyond. How does that continue to evolve going forward? So I think those are definitely two things that come to mind immediately, and thinking about some of the byproducts of a really tough year that are actually silver linings for a lot of communities.
Tommaso, do you want to go next?
Sure. Certainly would echo, a lot of what Brooke has shared. And I think, building on that, we also, I think have been able to do a lot more sort of kind of more specific types of virtual events. It used to be that we would be traveling to a city and trying to host one big event that sort of appealed to everyone, covered all the bases. You got your application process and program overview and everything in 2 hours, right? Now we're able to sort of break that up and give you kind of specific events that if you're interested in entrepreneurship, we can do a session specifically about what does entrepreneurship look like at Sloan. If you're sort of at that process where you're working on your application, we can give you an application tips sort of session. So I think allows applicants to be also a little bit more intentional about what they're choosing, how they're choosing to engage with schools. Are you, where you're at in the funnel, so that you can sort of get the most out of your time as well. But it's been, it's certainly been interesting. I think over the last year, there's been a lot of reflection, as a lot of changes have been accelerated. And I think, to Brooke's point, a lot of conversations now are about sort of what's next and, which of these silver linings do we sort of incorporate and which of these things that we've missed out on over the last year do we want to double back down on. So I'm very excited personally to kind of see what that new sort of admissions normal looks like in the next couple of years, but definitely a lot of reflection that's happening at this point.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Yeah, great points from my colleagues here. That gap of access, it's phenomenal that it has relatively closed, and so I love that we're all thinking about how we keep that going forward. We used to get maybe 100, 120 people coming out to our diversity symposium. We had 500 last year because, of course, you don't have to pay for the plane ticket and figure that out. So we won't drop that. We got to figure things out. The other point I want to make is kind of going back to what we've already shared a little bit around is values. And Haas is a super values driven school. We have our defining leadership principles. Once you start doing your research, they'll pop up pretty quickly. But two of them are question the status quo and beyond yourself. And what the whole admissions process had, in the last year and a half, what's seemed to have changed is that we get to lean into that even more and more and more. And I love that, right? Part of that is because we're getting more authentic stories from folks who recognize that in the last year and a half, either things have accelerated or folks have opened up their hearts and minds and realized that there's a path forward where they can be super values aligned to what they want to do through business school. And we read these phenomenal essays that refer to the fact that in the last year and a half, in the last 10 years, whatever, this has really changed for me and I want to be this kind of leader. We are loving that kind of passion, right? And I suspect everyone is getting that. And I love that, right? Because you come to business school, it's a big investment. And maybe we can talk about that. I know there's a lot of questions about the investment in this chat, but I'm so excited when I see your excitement. And when I see your excitement aligned with your values, aligned with our values around changing something in this ecosystem so that this stuff doesn't keep happening at this rate or at this intensity, that excites us in a lot of different ways. So that's legitimately something that's, I think, changed in the last year and a half. We're seeing more and more and more of that. And so I hope that trend continues as well.
It's interesting because in many ways, the pandemic has kind of taken a lot from a lot of people, but in many other ways, it's given a lot of opportunity back. And, you know, an example of that is access, right? And for students who are applying to go to your business schools, they now have access from their bedrooms or living rooms or dining room tables to be able to sit in. And like Brooke said, I don't have to worry about the flight. You know, I don't have to worry about paying for all these other factors, but I'm going to get what I came for. I want the knowledge, I want the information, and now I'm going to be able to get that. So yes, no, that's extremely important, extremely good to know. And I hope, and it's by the looks of it or by, you know, by what it sounds like, there are methods that are going to stay in place that allow people to gain that access and make it more equitable for everyone to attend. So thank you all for sharing. We're going to transition over to the Q&A section right now. We've got a lot of questions coming in. I guess attendees, feel free to continue dropping your questions in, continue upvoting questions that you really, really want to know answers to. Catherine and I will sort of just, I guess, popcorn off each other and asking questions. You all can feel free to answer whichever ones you want. Don't feel obligated to answer them if you don't necessarily want to, but if you have any tidbits or anything, you can go ahead and answer them until we are at time. So I'll start off with the first one on my list. It says, how many students are admitted into the MBA program are directly from undergrad, and what are you looking for in undergrad applicants? And I know that there was another question about are students at a disadvantage if they apply to business school right out of undergrad? So I'll kind of just join those two together. And whoever wants to tackle. Okay, Brooke.
Yeah, right, hopped off mute. Yeah, happy to take a first pass at that. So two things. So one, we do require that everyone has business experience, right? So like, yes, you can absolutely apply to HBS using our 2+2 deferred admissions program. That's essentially where you apply as a senior in college. You get admission accepted to HBS, and then you go work for 2 to 4 years before matriculating. And that's just important because you are going to be in a classroom with folks who are coming to us directly from industry, and we want to ensure that you have enough of a foundation for work experience for the course content to even be relevant, right? Like if you've never had a performance review, if you've never seen a balance sheet, you know, first year could be a little challenging. So the goal is for you to have some work experience under your belt before you matriculate. And we do stay in touch. Like we stay connected. We want to know where you are, how you're doing, what's happening, and can help be support systems and help you be really thoughtful about selecting what position you decide to take, where and what industry, et cetera, and thinking about ultimately your time when you join us at HBS. That said, I'll be really frank, and certainly this may not be the case for other programs, because our 2+2 program, it's not a gamble, but like, you know, we don't see those folks for 2 to 4 years. And so, you know, and again, like everyone chooses a different path. The version of them that we see 2 to 4 years out is often very different from the version that we see when we interview. So that is a very selective pool for us. It's actually more selective than our regular rounds of admissions. And so what I want to elevate is that there are a lot of folks that apply 2+2 and get in. There are a lot of folks who don't. But what we do see pretty frequently is a lot of our folks who do apply via the 2+2 program apply again later as reapplicants. And I think all of our programs are especially reapplicant friendly. And a lot of times, like, you know, just having a few years of work experience under your belt, having some different experiences from the ones that you had in undergrad, but also being in a different pool that's not as selective as the 2+2 pool can be really helpful for folks. 10% of every one of our incoming class is reapplicants. So it's also, you know, a big part of our student body. So I also don't want it to ever feel like an isolating or like, oh, I applied, I didn't get in, that's a wrap. Like if being at one of these schools is your dream, shoot your shot. Definitely don't miss that opportunity. But yeah, hopefully that's a lens on ours, but I know a lot of the programs are very similar. So I'll leave it to Om and Tommaso to add anything else.
Yeah, it is quite similar here at Haas as well. So similarly, we have a program, Accelerated Access, same concept. It's deferred admission. And all those things that Brooke just mentioned certainly apply, right? There is a lens of competitive advantage for folks who are coming in with some depth of work experience. And it's not just about how we see you in terms of being competitive. It's really important for you. right? Like coming through these classes, you are coming to transform. And I'm a alum of this program, so I speak to it from that perspective where I say, like, if I had come in straight from undergrad, I would not have gotten out of this program what I actually got out of it. To Brook's point, right? I had some context. When an amazing professor at any of our schools asks a question about, I don't know, some key concept of leadership and influence, you listen to someone who's got, 7 years in the military and special ops and 13 years doing amazing things in, mining in Chile and 4 years as a teacher and a year leading schools. The depth of understanding to be able to take that information in, process it, and then come to some interesting conclusions. A lot of that does come from professional experience. So don't see it as just a pure competitive thing, but it's even for your own investment again. To get the most out of it, you get more out of it if you have a little bit of that context. So there's no hard and fast rule about it, but that's how we look at that. That is one of our criteria. We're like, is this person going to be able to get out what they really should get out at this point, in addition to what they can contribute, right? Tommaso, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree and really don't have anything to add. I think you both covered it, and really goes the same for Sloan. We have our MBA early admission, which is a similar sort of deferred admissions program. So we'll just say ditto to everything that Brook and Om have covered.
Great. I wanted to call out, so Alyssa Ha had a question when you all were talking about creating spaces for underrepresented communities. She wrote, creating spaces for underrepresented community is so important. I'm glad to hear about that work. But I'd also love to hear if there's also work making existing communities, clubs, etc., more inclusive and safe. Who wants to sort of take this one?
I can start. That's a really great question, Alyssa. Thank you. And I know that this has been something that our Senate at Sloan has been sort of working on. We have a couple of subcommittees in our Senate, and really looking at sort of the landscape of our clubs, and from that sort of diversity lens, and thinking about sort of the representation, particularly in leadership roles, and certainly within our Senate, but also in some of our other organizations. Tackling some of those challenges with encouraging folks from underrepresented backgrounds to seek out those leadership roles, to support them in those efforts. So I know that's definitely something that they're tackling. I think the other piece of it, which you'll find in business school, is oftentimes clubs have costs associated with them. They may have annual membership dues, or you'll hear that MBA students love to travel when there's not a pandemic going on, and there's costs. And so that's another piece that I know our students have been engaging in conversation around lately, is around sort of bridging some of those gaps and creating equitable opportunities for folks coming from different sort of financial backgrounds to be able to fully engage and participate in the experience.
Yeah, I think 100% agreed. And I think the other thing that I would elevate, and it's an area that in our office, I've been really challenging us to do the work around and to be intentional in our framing and our thoughts. And Om mentioned this earlier, is also thinking about how we cultivate spaces with intersectionality in mind, right? It's, people are always like, oh, are you going to this women's event, right? And I'm always thoughtful about which events like that I choose to go to. And it's not because I don't strongly identify with being woman, but in fact, I don't get to navigate the world as just a woman, right? When I show up, you see a woman of color, you see a Black woman. And so that really drives how I see myself, but also how I show up. And so I think it's increasingly important for us as institutions, and I think our students are really championing and leading this work as well, to continue to be thoughtful about cultivating spaces where people can bring all of themselves, right? And so it's not just a women's event. It's not just an LGBTQ+ event, right? It's not just a students of color event. But rather being thoughtful around the framing and the setup of these types of events so that people feel comfortable bringing their whole self. Because I think that piece is huge. And it's often, if I'm being honest, like a real challenge, frankly, for a lot of our students of color, our students from low income backgrounds, and our students who are first gen, because, if you're like me, like you've been conditioned in the workplace to only bring a certain version of yourself, right? And I love to think of business school as a 2-year hiatus where you just get to be you. And frankly, for a lot of folks, figure out who you are, because it's really easy to get so far away from the version of you that you used to be or that you aspire to be and not realize it. And so I like to think that our communities are the types of spaces inherently where folks can rediscover those aspects of themselves and develop and build the muscles around being confident on the other side of the experience and making sure that when they re-enter the workforce, they're re-entering whole and they're confident in showing up whole. So I think that's the other piece of the work that our students are amazing partners and champions around, and that I think you'll continue to see us prioritize in our work, certainly from an admissions lens as well.
Thank you. Hafsat, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes. So this question, I guess, speaks towards one of the things that Om was mentioning earlier about financial assistance and money and business school being a very big investment. And so one of our attendees wants to know, can you speak about the types of financial assistance the business school gives to its students?
Yeah, I can start us off on that. Here are a few tips. One, there is financial assistance. I think we're all going to say that it exists, right? So it exists in the form of scholarships, both merit-based and need-based. It exists in a different way, but still exists in the form of loans, which is a really nuanced conversation, I know, when there might be either distrust or kind of just loans that's terrifying, right? The idea of taking those loans. Very real, very real. All these things are very real. There are so many different ways to fund your education, including on-campus work and all that kind of stuff. The biggest piece of advice I can give you is start planning, meaning plan ahead / plan early, and work with our financial aid office, because their whole perspective is to meet you where you are, help you craft the way you're going to fund this education, right? And it's almost always a portfolio approach. The idea being that basically, some percentage of our students are here on a mixture of scholarships, loans, work study, and a little bit of savings from their work, right? And that's what the majority of students come through with. And it's a scary proposition. So the best we can do is to make sure that you have all the information you need, which we will provide transparently, and just to make sure that you feel very much heard in your whole process, because all of those pieces I know come with their own contexts and challenges. But we want to close that financial gap of access as best we can. That is one of our goals. So I'll just put that out explicitly, and I encourage you to start planning and meet with us and discuss your plans.
Yeah, no, I think amazing advice. I think the other thing that I think is important as you guys are thinking about graduate school in general and business school in particular is, as you're thinking about schools, one of the questions you want to ask is, are you need-based or merit-based? And do you offer both? Because I do think that does have a dramatic impact on kind of how the institution is best positioned to provide financial support while you're a student. So at HBS, we offer need-based aid exclusively, and that's very much tied to our belief that students' backgrounds shouldn't be a barrier for them to have access to and add value to and learn from our community. And so that's a huge part of our financial aid model. Which is exclusively and entirely funded by our alumni base. So I think that's also a huge testament to the experience that folks have while they're with us, but I think also the community that you're connected with for life. Our alumni believe enough in their experience and time with us to fund that possibility and opportunity for generations of HBS students that come behind them. So I think that piece is huge. That said, if you see the links on our website also offer a number of kind of different views and takes around the financial aid piece. We also have a dedicated person in our financial aid office who also is first gen, who is phenomenal when it comes to kind of answering the questions. I feel like, the finance pieces, a lot of us come from communities where it's like, we don't discuss money outside of the house, right? And then all of a sudden you get into business school and it's like, tell me about all your money. It's like, but we just met, right? No. So we've been really thoughtful about making sure we've got a process and an infrastructure in place that helps folks navigate something that just inherently and fundamentally can feel super strange. The only other thing I'll add is we added a new component to our financial aid process this year that we're piloting out. And it's focused on socioeconomic status and background. We realize that in assessing people's need, a lot of what we can see in 3 years worth of tax returns doesn't tell us the full picture. And there are a number of our students who, frankly come to us as the wealthiest people in their families. And subsequently are providing financial support for a younger sibling who's going through undergrad or for parents, especially in the last year. So this SES component, it's open text, it's self-report, it's optional, it's not required, but it just gives students who are navigating some of the complexities of being first gen, of being from a low income background, or just from frankly having a tough few years, to add some additional flavor and context and insight into that aspect of their lived experience that doesn't necessarily just show up in a tax return. And those are evaluated case by case, and award and aid is provided with that in mind. So I think those are just kind of two of the things I wanted to make sure that I elevated that are specific to our process.
Thank you. I also, as you mentioned, Brooke, with the alumni and how they help in that capacity, one of our other questions in here is, what are the resources that your programs have for underrepresented minority students and alumni? And so, I've gotten here, I've graduated. How or is the business school going to assist me in any way?
That's a great question. I think, certainly our alumni network definitely is similar to kind of that support system when you're a student that I've talked about already. I think that continues as an alum. We have, within our alumni sort of network, we have alumni clubs, both sort of regionally focused, but also affinity focused as well. So those communities exist even within the alumni network. And I think the alums really sort of, partner with the current students, and they're, whether it's through formal mentorship or, informal, definitely create that sort of network of support, for students as well as, as their alums. I work regularly with our alumni affinity council, which is kind of our leadership board for our alums from underrepresented backgrounds, and they work with admissions on sort of recruiting. They also work with career development office, and so I know they've been hosting a series of panels with our career development office this year about sort of navigating different workplaces with different identities. As well as creating obviously the sort of social networks and those networking opportunities as well. And so definitely, I think as you're looking at different business schools, the alumni network is going to be an incredibly powerful piece of going to business school, and so it's important to assess that and see what ways you have to engage with them, even before you're an alum as a current student. And I think in terms of supporting our alums, they have lifetime access to our career development resources. They have opportunities to come back and take executive education courses. So there's also opportunities to stay engaged in the community as an alum and continue learning as well.
Yeah, the only thing I think I would add, I agreed, all the same. Spoiler alert, a lot of these things were all the same. The other thing I would add, and I think this is also likely the same, I think the other piece of this is that I actually do think your question highlights an area that is probably far more emergent in our communities. And I think a lot of that, frankly, is rooted in the fact that there has historically been an assumption that the further away one moves from the undergrad experience, and the more successful they come, the less salient being first gen is to their identity. And I think that's a misnomer. I think that's a myth, right? I think it's also why, grad schools, particularly business schools, were probably a little later to the party when it came to having institutional and infrastructural support for first gen and low income students, because the thought was, but you're here, you made it, right? You're not that anymore, you're here. And the reality is still navigating that every single day. And so I think that's the other piece of this. It's I think for us at least, we're just now seeing the generation of students come through who owned that aspect of their identity from jump, came and lived it up and created pathways, gateways, and open doors for the next gen behind them, and are now re-entering the workforce as alums, better positioned to look back and provide support to current students who are in the trenches. And so I think that's the other piece of all of this that, you know, is at least my observation, is that just in general, we've been a little slower. And I think a lot of that's just rooted in an inaccurate perception. And I'm grateful to our students for the courage and the honesty and the willingness to engage in these conversations with the institution around, hey, that it didn't go away. I'm still all of that. I'm proud of it. It adds value, and it's how I see myself. And I want to see that better reflected and, more importantly, better supported at the institution and beyond.
So I think oh, sorry, go on. Were you going to say something?
I'll just say that I really appreciate those reflections from both y'all. It's very cool to see that all of our institutions are in a pretty similar place, both in terms of how we think about support, how we think about growth and improvement. To Brooke, your last few points there, I think we're seeing that as well. And it's really important to acknowledge it and to really understand, as an institution, what's our responsibility there. Again, I go back to creating the conditions, investing the resources for folks to thrive. And for folks, I mean, in our entire ecosystem. You've heard us talk about kind of the support ecosystem we have from alumni, students, incoming students, et cetera. It's an extremely give back kind of culture. And that's a really powerful thing to see. We will continue to improve in elevating that and amplifying what needs to be amplified, so that folks can see each other, support each other, and we can support all of you.
You're making me want to go back to grad school now. So, you know, related to this is we have a question in terms of how to represent one's identity through the admissions process. So the question reads, for folks that identify as an underrepresented group, whether that's race or being first gen or otherwise, how should we make that clear to admissions that we identify in that way? So how do they tell their story through the admissions process?
I can kick off what's probably true at all of our schools in terms of just a very direct answer is that we have questions around it. And so if you feel comfortable sharing that information, you will directly be able to tell us how you identify. And Brooke mentioned something earlier that I think we also share, which is we also have sections to get to know a little bit more. We use the word open text, right? It's a little bit more context, right? So we'll know some of your identity, and we'll also give you a lot of space to the extent you feel comfortable to share that authentic journey, the story, the pieces of the context that may not show up directly even in this question, to say like, yes, this is my actual context. And like, I love Brooke's example, I'm supporting my family, right? That's not directly asked, and I may have a relatively high paying job, but anyway, that's the whole conversation around generational wealth, salary, those differences as we can get into. But you can tell us, right? If you feel comfortable, tell us, and we will hold that with great care.
Brooke, were you gonna answer?
Can you get it together? Like camera off, mic off, all the things off. Yeah, I think, you know, I think there are a lot of different ways to tell your story. And there are a lot of different ways to communicate that. We see it, there's no right way. Let me say that part first. There is no right way. Like, your story is your story, and whatever way is most authentic to you, I think, is the best approach to take. We see a lot of students add light, color, flavor, and visibility into their lived experience through the essay. Our essay is one of those open-ended Pandora's boxes that, for all my type A friends out there, really pisses them off, because there's one, no word limit. Two, the question is like super broad. They're like, no, can you ask me something specific? Nope. And again, I don't want to tell you how to tell your truth, right? And who am I to say tell your truth, but only in 250 words? Right? So it's open-ended, and we encourage folks to use that as a space. The other thing, and this is like hot tip, is there is a space on our application that's just like an open text box that says additional info. And people usually get to that and are like, am I supposed to have something that goes here? Is this a trick question? And I'm like, no, not a trick question. If you have something, it goes here. If you don't, we good. A lot of people, if you don't have an essay where it's like, oh, and also, by the way, like all these things, if you've chosen to take a different path with your essay, totally cool. A lot of times, anything that feels like it didn't have a happy home or a place somewhere else in your application, a lot of those things end up in the additional info here. And there's that, you know, that does not need to be an essay. It can be bullet or just say what it is. But that's a great opportunity in most applications, that if you feel like, I feel good, I feel like I feel like the whole picture's here, but there's just like one little piece that I want to make sure they know, or one part that I want to explain a little better, that text box is an amazing place to fill in any gaps that you see with your application before submitting.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add here, but I think, it's really important, again, to just echo that, wherever it feels right to you to sort of, share this is okay. And like Brooke said, there's no sort of right or wrong. There are those direct places, but where I often learn more is sort of in the essays or the video that we have, or even in the interview where you're talking about your lived experiences. And I think it's important to know that, as an admissions committee, when we're looking at applications, we're not just focused on the academic and professional experience. We are sort of really thinking about, who you are as a person, and what lived experiences you will bring to our community, how you will contribute those unique experiences to our community to make our community better, to engage, to contribute. And so however you feel, is appropriate to share those within the context of the application, as long as, of course, you're still answering the questions that we do ask, or we ask some more specific questions maybe than HBS there. But, as long as you're answering the questions where it makes sense to share pieces of who you are, even if it's outside of work, is going to be important to allow the committee to get that full sense of, who you are, and again, what you'll bring to our community.
Okay, I think that the general consensus is there is plenty of room to share your story in whatever capacity that feels comfortable for you. It's good to know. We have another question that sort of addresses, or I guess the follow-up to something that was asked earlier about work experience and what that looks like for applicants. Should I simply not apply for general admissions if I don't have post-undergrad experience, or can I still, quote unquote, shoot my shot with hopes that my internship experience will suffice?
When your words come back to haunt you. Yeah, so in every scenario, I'm going to be team shoot your shot, but no, you do have to go to work. You have to go to work and legitimate work experience. But I also will say, there are a number of folks who are entrepreneurs. There are a number of folks who come out of undergrad and who were like, I had this brilliant idea and I'm about to shoot my shot in the entrepreneurial space, and do that for 2 or 3 years before applying to us. And that absolutely does count. But you do have, for us at least, you definitely do have to have some work experience. And again, it's not us looking for ways to crush dreams and ruin lives. It's really us trying to set you up for success in the classroom, because your first year will be struggle bus if you have not had enough context to understand what folks are talking about in your first year courses. So that's our answer.
I will add, this may not apply to this question, but the only spaces where I see some nuance there would be, for example, folks coming with a relatively non-traditional journey, right, into their undergrad. There might be some room to tell your story. For example, we have folks who maybe, again, to use the military example, enlisted and were working for 5-6 years, then they went to undergrad and now they're thinking about it. Even in that context, we would engage with you to really understand what your perfect path forward would be. But we have folks, right? And we have people who were working for 10 years in retail. They rose the ranks and then they came back to school because that's what life required of them, right? They were supporting family, whatever it might be. Cool, that's part of your story. Bring it to us. Maybe one way to kind of approach it with all of our schools is, if you have specific questions and if you really want to engage on this, we're open. We want to have that conversation with you to set you up for success. I hope that you're hearing that from all of us right now, right? This is a panel. We have to kind of give some general perspective, but if you really want to talk about it, come talk, and we'll try to guide you and know that we have your best interest at heart, again, so that it's not a struggle bus, to Brooke's point.
And let me just add one more thing, and that's, I know we've primarily been talking about, MBA degrees and MBA programs here, as that's, the programs that we all work most closely with, but the MBA is not the only graduate business degree. There are specialized masters out there. We have a master in finance, we have a master in business analytics that are specifically designed as early career programs for folks to apply to right out of undergrad. So if you're, considering certain, industry areas where, you want to pursue graduate school first and get a little bit more experience, those opportunities do exist. And so I encourage you to explore some of those as well. And they don't, prohibit you from doing an MBA down the road. We've certainly seen some students do our specialized masters and then come back for an MBA, and sometimes you don't. But those are also options to consider as you think about graduate business education. It's not just the MBA.
So in keeping with that, in terms of, again, you sort of sharing, very candidly how you're present to students, how it is about their growing and learning, this actually question relates to that. It's from Rashana. How does business school create transformative learning experiences? What initiative programs are held to create multi-dimensional students?
No, like, go for it, home. That's a multidimensional question. I think my lens is, I think a lot of that learning actually happens, through the students. I think, one of the things HBS is known for is the case method, right? And like, that's how we teach all of our classes. It's a big piece of our curriculum. And the beauty of it really is, in my opinion, isn't in just the cases alone, but rather is in the conversations that the cases force. And how you get the opportunity to learn from perspectives from people who are just fundamentally different from you, right? I mean, that's the beauty of being, in a class where you've got 36% of your students who are international, folks who are coming from all walks of life, all geographic regions of the US and beyond. And all different perspectives and backgrounds and industries. And so I think a lot of that personal, interpersonal, professional growth that people see, I think a lot of it happens intrinsically, and dare I say through osmosis and proximity to folks who have navigated the world in a way that's just very different from yours. It's easy, in your old age, right, to get very set in your ways and your ideals and your values and your thinking. And so the opportunity to build community with folks who, in any other context, you likely would walk past and never bat an eye at, but to have an opportunity to really build community and friendships and partnerships with folks who are so fundamentally different from you, I think is where you see a lot of that personal growth and the multidimensional aspect of that really come into play. So I think that jumps out to me, but curious what Om and Tommaso might say.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. And I think certainly at Sloan, but I'm sure this goes for all of our schools, there's a lot of experiential learning that happens and a lot of opportunities, to sort of break out from just, talking about, the theory and sort of, to really thinking about sort of the application. And that's going back to some of our previous questions. One of the benefits of coming in with work experience is you can directly apply what you're learning to your own lived experiences, but also whether it's through working on hands-on projects, whether it's through doing a summer internship, which many of you will do if you're doing a 2-year MBA. You have these hands-on opportunities to really sort of apply what you're learning, and I think that really helps sort of take it to the next level, where it's not just, okay, we're talking about how to be a good leader, but you're applying some of those toolkits. We have a really cool class that we just launched where it's a sort of leadership class, and the students in the class are all leaders of clubs or conferences or organizations on campus. And so that is their project, that they're sort of, they're in class talking about leadership, and then they're sort of going in and applying what they're learning as they lead their club or organization, and then coming back and reflecting on it and sort of iterating on it. So those more hands-on approaches, I think, are really a big part of the business school experience as well.
Yeah, love those points. I think this is a really important question, not only in terms of what schools do to help create that transformative learning experience. I think we've already talked about that a good bit. Honestly, that's our fundamental charge, is to help create those learning experiences. It's kind of everything we do. If I may, let me flip that back to you though. As a prospective student coming in, think about what the conditions need to be around you in your experience for you to transform, right? You probably need a space where you have some trust. Right? It's hard to transform when you don't trust. It's hard to transform when you're not around other people who are pushing you and you're open and you're curious, right? So think about some of those fundamental characteristics that only you can bring to the table. We talked about authenticity. I just brought in trust, right? These are some of the conditions that we try to create through our admissions process to make sure you're going to be around people who are excellent, because you just are going to be around people who are excellent and driven and done amazing things, and humble, right? Not going around in a way that just feels like a sledgehammer, so that you don't feel that psychological safety and that trust to be authentic, to transform. Anyway, that's my experience. Like, you have to kind of have everyone contributing to that kind of a transformation. Otherwise, you're going to stunt your growth in some way. And so we've talked about our commitment. I urge you to continue to think about your commitment as you're going through this process. What would it take for you to transform? And then hold all of us to that standard. Hold all the schools you apply to say, like, is this the place that I can transform? And that will be different for different people, which is what makes it totally okay if one of the schools matches your criteria and one doesn't. It's totally okay.
I like that response. It's like the quote, ask not what the world can do for you, but what you can do for the world. It's kind of flipping the script. We have time for one more question. We're going to throw it back to the whole admissions thing. And so this question is, how heavily does the GMAT score weigh on an admittance decision? And are there any resources you would recommend to students who plan on taking the exam?
I'm happy to start here. So I think, as we're looking at an application, we are interested in assessing your academic ability to make sure that we're setting you up for success, that you're going to, be able to, enter into the classroom and hit the ground running. 2 years is a short time to fit in a lot of learning. And so, again, we want to make sure that you're best prepared for that. And so the GMAT standardized test scores are just one data point out of many that we have as we're assessing that academic ability. So, in our process, the GMAT is never sort of make or break. If it's lower than what we like to see, then I start to look at other pieces of the application to see, what else can I learn? Are there other pieces of the application that give me that confidence that this particular applicant, will do well here at MIT? So it's one data point, and I think for students who struggle with test taking, that is certainly something we see a lot. There are, as we've talked about, opportunities in the application to share some of that context. There's but there's a lot of other pieces, from transcripts to any additional coursework you're taking, that you can share in the application to give the committee sort of that confidence in your academic ability. So I think it gets a lot of attention in the application process, but I would caution you not to spend a disproportionate amount of time focusing on that test, prepping for that test, and then you get to the rest of the application and you're not able to put your best sort of foot forward on your essays and some of those other pieces of the application that can really be more of the difference makers and more impactful, I think, for the admissions committee when we're taking a look at an application.
Yeah, no. The only other hot take I would add is stay off the blogs, friends. Okay? All the lies. You hear me? What Tommaso said is big facts. Okay? The test is a part. You are not your test score. You're not your undergrad GPA either. Spoiler alert, right? We are looking at you as a whole person, not as any one piece or part of your story. And he's so right. Like, the best tip you got today was, don't spend all your time sweating and pressed about a GMAT or a GRE score. We take both. And then just like fly through your essay, rush through your employment description, forget to upload your friends, do yourselves a favor. The score is a piece of it. It's not everything. It's not everything. There's plenty of folks with perfect scores who don't get in every year. And it's not because we didn't think they could do the work, right? That's not our only goal. Our goal is to cultivate the most diverse classroom possible to the benefit of our entire community and all of our students. So what Tommaso said, but also stay off the blogs.
So that concludes our time. And actually, that's a great sort of tagline to end with. Stay off the blog, stay true to yourself, be a truth teller. So I would love for our participants to join me in offering appreciation to all three of you. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your raw honesty, Tommaso, and Brook. We'd also like to give a huge shout out to all the student attendees. We appreciate you engaging with us, asking incredibly thoughtful, provocative questions. And as we close, I'd like to invite our three panelists to share some brief closing remarks. And we can start with Om.
Stay off the blog. Just kidding. Just kidding. You already heard that. I'm going to remember that one, though. It's tough. I hope that you've really heard something that resonated with you here. Part of our job here, part of our work here is to help you understand that you absolutely belong in this process. It will be difficult. We're not saying it's an easy process. None of us said that. But we're here to support you in every step of the way. We are looking for reasons to say yes. We want to see you succeed, and we want to see you find the great school for yourself, right? All those things are true. And start internalizing that. You belong in this process. You got this. You're going to have to work hard, and you got this, right? And we're here to help you along the way.
I'll go ahead, and then Brooke can be the closer again. But yeah, I would just echo what's been said. I think kudos to all of you for being here and taking the step to learn about this process. Hopefully this has been helpful and demystified some of it, but that's what we're here for. And don't let this be sort of the only interaction with us. Continue to connect with us. Reach out to us individually, attend our events, whatever sort of that might look like. For you to continue this, exploration, seek out mentors in your own sort of networks and communities as well to support you as you go through this process. But absolutely, you can do it. There's a place for you in business school. There's a need for you in business school, I think, as we talked about at the start of our conversation today. And so really just want to thank you all for taking that step to be here today. And hopefully we've been helpful.
Yeah, no, I will reiterate, shoot your shot. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And you've met people right here who are willing to help you. There's literally no reason for you to say, oh, I can't apply because I don't know, I don't have an answer to this question, or I'm not sure how to handle this. You are literally looking at the people who live and breathe, helping you figure out and navigate this process. So, I speak for all of us when I say we expect to see you and hear from you. And shoot your shot, man. Everyone else is, right? So don't miss out, don't self-select out. The only surefire way to make sure you don't manage to get into business school is if you don't apply. And the business world is counting on you, so no pressure.
No pressure at all. Thank you all so much. Yes, no, literally the last shot and everything. Thank you all so much for joining us, to our panelists, to our attendees. It's been amazing having you all here. I just posted a post-event evaluation in the chat. And so to all of our attendees, we're asking that you just take 2 to 3 minutes to share your candid feedback. Your comments help us improve and refine our programming, right? So what went wrong, what went right, let us know. The evaluation is 100% anonymous.